Hey guys, welcome to another Sasquatch Theory podcast. Deep in the Blue Ridge Mountains along the remote stretches of the Blue Ridge Parkway, a law enforcement officer trained in SWAT and a first responder found himself facing something he couldn't explain. What began as a routine night using a thermal device quickly turned into a direct encounter with a massive, intelligent presence moving through the darkness. One that didn't just watch, but seemed to think, react, and communicate. From a late night standoff outside his home to a terrifying camping incident in October 2023 involving his family, John describes two encounters with a creature that moved between shadows, stood over 7 feet tall, and closed the distance like a predator. If you enjoy listening to Sasquatch Theory, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and if you have your own Bigfoot or cryptid encounter you would like to log down here on Sasquatch Theory, feel free to reach out sometime at sasquatchtheory@outlook.com. With all that being said, let's dive straight into John's cryptid encounter from the Blue Ridge Parkway. All right, John, welcome to Sasquatch Theory. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. John, if you would, tell me a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and your experiences from the very beginning, please.
I'm nearly 40. I've had a long career in law enforcement and as a first responder. I'm SWAT trained, sniper trained, and, kind of work for a county out in the middle of nowhere. I originally was born in this area, raised in this area, but I moved around the South quite a bit. I'm sure you can probably tell from my accent. But, I know some people have mentioned, growing up and seeing shows or being interested in this sort of thing. None of this was ever interesting to me. I didn't ever believe in paranormal stuff, Bigfoot, aliens, anything like that. And, it's a little different when it happens to you. But yeah, so to get kind of down to the incident, and I will call it an incident because it wasn't just a sighting or seeing sign. It was a face-to-face encounter, and it wasn't a very pleasant one. So, bear with me if I'm a little bit agitated retelling it. But yes, basically, I was working and came home. I had just purchased a new thermal. It was an AGM 640. It's a pretty good thermal, and it way outclassed what we had available locally with our department. And, the intention was to use it for search and rescue or locate, a fleeing suspect in the woods, stuff like that happens here and there. And so I was just playing around with it my entire shift, and I came home around 11:30. And I was still messing with it, and I figured, I'd get out, and instead of normally I just get home and I go straight in the door. I'm ready to decompress, take a shower, whatever, go to bed. But this night, the cool factor of the thermal really, it really bit me, and I decided I'd just kind of walk around the house, check out the property, play with the settings, that sort of thing. So I get out of my vehicle, and I walk around to the side of my house, and I'm fully expecting to see wildlife. I live in the woods, basically. I live outside city limits, out in the country. I have creeks basically surrounding me, woods surrounding me. And so I fully expected to see deer, coyotes, skunks, possums, anything. So I walk around the corner, and immediately, 50 yards at the bottom of the hill behind my house, I see a large thermal signature. And at first, it was on the ground. At first, I'm thinking, that's pretty big. That might be a deer, like, bedding down in the open at the bottom of the field. And as I kept staring at it, I kept seeing little bits of movement. And, the more I played with the settings on the thermal, I got some zoom going, I got some focus going, and I could clearly make out that it looked like a man laying prone. And for those who don't know, like prone, think of like an army man crawling, right? Like you're just laying on your stomach, flat as you can be, arms kind of tucked in. And he was trying to be flat and unseen. Like it was very clear, like in my mind, it was as if I had caught someone or something by surprise and they went prone immediately just to avoid detection. Just low to the ground, got some grass cover, and just trying to be stealthy. Well, the more I looked at it, the more I guess it noticed that I noticed. I think it was kind of unaware that I would be able to spot it. And I could see, and this is the part that blows my mind. It goes into a push-up position, and it's like looking straight at me, and it's pitch black. I'm not backlit by any lighting. Stars aren't out. The moon's not out. It was a very dark night. And, I would have never seen it without a thermal, that's for sure. And I was questioning how it knew I was there, really. But it gets in a push-up position, stares at me for a second, and then stands up on two legs. And at this point, I'm kind of freaking out. I'm still in all my gear, and I draw my service weapon, semi-automatic 9mm. And I just kind of hold it in my right hand, kind of facing the ground as I'm still looking at it through the thermal, trying to figure out what in the world's going on. Like a million scenarios are playing in my head. I'm thinking, escaped convict, someone with a vendetta, something like that. But as it stood straight and tall, it was very clearly not a normal human. I mean, it had to have been 7 foot, at least 7 foot, and built like a linebacker with pads on, like the old 90s kind of football pads. Like that's how wide its shoulders were compared to the hips. And the legs were fairly long. I ruled out bear immediately just based on the lower body and the proportions. It was a very human-like proportion. The legs were long and not short. The hind area looked very human-like, but the arms hung down almost to the knees. And, it scared me to death, but I'm looking at it trying to figure out what it is. And, the more I think about it, the more I'm like, well, this some guy means no good. It's the middle of the night. I'm in the middle of nowhere. What are you doing in the bottom of my field? So as I began to raise my pistol, I was going to announce, who I was, who are you, what are you doing, that sort of thing. Something enters my mind, and this is like the hardest thing for me to deal with because, background, law enforcement, first responder, that sort of thing, you get used to adrenaline, you get used to scary situations, standoffs. I've had armed standoffs, all this sort of thing, and never in any of those situations has a voice entered my mind. But it was very clear. The moment I started to raise my pistol, it just came in loud and clear, I'm going to kill you. Now, at the time, I kind of brushed that off. My mind was racing. But as I started to raise the pistol, a voice came over, said, I'm going to kill you. As I was still raising the pistol, it took like 2 hops, but like the first one was a hop, sort of like the NBA player hopping into the paint to do a layup. That's the best I can relate it to. But then after that initial hop, it was like it went on all fours and leaped like a big cat. And it did this, it cleared a good 15 yards in these 2 movements. And the movements were not robotic, but very fluid and very like Olympian sort of stuff. It was wild to see. But as soon as it hit the wood line, it rushed up towards me, uphill in the thickets and briars. And this is a heavily wooded wood line, and there's briars 3 foot tall, even higher in some places, very thick, very rugged. Like, you can't just walk through there, even if you're decked out and, you know, all sorts of clothing. It'll rip up Carhartts kind of stuff. But it gets to the wood line and then charges all the way up the hill and gets parallel with me. The whole time I'm tracking it with a thermal, and it moves so fast that despite, like, this was a really good thermal, despite the high refresh rate, or low, I'm not sure how you put it, but like it has a really good refresh rate. You know, some of them kind of lag, especially some of the older kind of hunting ones. They kind of lag, but this one didn't ever lag, like, you know. But it goes so fast that it becomes sort of a blur in my screen, and I'm trying to zoom back out to keep up with it. It comes up the hill 50 yards all through the thicket and gets parallel with me and parks itself behind a fairly small tree, like a 6-inch pine. And the voice re-enters saying, "I'm going to kill you." And at this point, you know, I kind of don't doubt it. And, you know, I'm a little older and heavy set now. So, I mean, I'm not, running doesn't even cross my mind really, because I think you know, my mind's racing a mile a minute. It's flight or fight. Like, it's on sort of thing. And when it got parallel with me and did the second, "I'm going to kill you," I'm thinking there's no way I can turn my back and run, because, you know, I've got to go 20 yards to get back to the front door and then go around the porch, unlock the door, and go in. So, like, there's no chance I make it. I just saw how fast it came up the hill, and it was like maybe 2 or 3 seconds. It covered a good 50 yards. And, you know, we kind of have a standoff there, and he's approximately 10 yards away. I mean, it's really hard to deal with. I apologize, but so at this point, I still got the thermal on it with my left hand, my pistol raised, pointed in its general direction, really, because it's fairly hard to see. I could still clearly see a head and an arm on thermal, like, wrapped around this tree. And how there wasn't more visible, I'm not entirely sure. It might have been the growth, the foliage, you know, whatnot. But I only saw an arm and a head, and I remember, you know, thinking all these scenarios. You know, do I run and try to make for the door? Do I take a shot here? Because this thing is very aggressive, and, you know, I've dealt with bears before, not here. Bears are very rare here, and it's just your normal black bears, and they're scared of their own shadow. They don't bother anybody. So it's, you know, I'm weighing all these situation scenarios, what it could be, what's going on in my head, and my head was just going a mile a minute. But like I said, it like projected this message: "I'm going to kill you." So we're having a standoff, and it seemed like it lasted forever. I mean, it might have been a minute or two, but then, you know, it felt like it might have been 10 or 15, you know. Well, as it's staying there, I'm staying where I'm at. We're both just kind of holding our ground and staring at each other. I could almost sense that it was confused that I could track it. Now, even if I didn't have a thermal, you could fairly well track it coming up towards me, because it sounded like a herd of elephants stomping through the woods to get to me. I mean, like a bulldozer or something, just mowing stuff down all the way to me, just very loud. But it almost seemed like it was confused that I could still track it and keep up with where it was. And we're having this standoff, and, you know, I'm sitting there almost trying to project my own thoughts loudly, like, "Hey, like, why do you want to kill me? This is my house. You know, I live here. I'm not bothering you." You know, I'm almost like trying to think that out loud, although I don't think I ever said anything out loud. But there was no response. But as we were just having this standoff, I remember thinking, like, I don't have a choice here. Like, I'm cornered. I'm basically a couple feet off of the siding of my house. I've got a AC unit to my left, and then the end of the house to my right, and then I'd have to go all the way around 20 some yards to get to a door. So yeah, I feel basically cornered. Like, I'm trapped. Like, something's going to have to be done here, one way or another. So I'm contemplating it, and I didn't want to put down the thermal because it seemed to be the only way, like, I could tell where it was, because I tried to look with my naked eye, could not see a thing. But on the thermal, it was clear as day, an arm wrapped around this tree and a head kind of peeking out from time to time. And what gets me is, like, I could see sort of its traps because it was like hunched over and it was still taller than me. So if you can imagine, it's like hunched over to where you could see really muscular traps, but like still taller than me. So I'm trying to figure out what it is while simultaneously trying to save my own life here. I decide I'm going to set down the thermal and do a two-handed grip. This is about 10 or 12 yards. I'm pretty good shot, So I'm thinking, man, like, this is some crazy otherworldly stuff, but it is what it is. It's telling me I'm going to kill you. Like, there's not many choices to be had. Well, when I set down the thermal on the AC unit and raised the pistol, I switch on the weapon-mounted light, which is a Streamlight TLR1HL. It's a pretty bright light. I hit it with the light, and it like recoils and covers its face and lets out an ungodly scream, and immediately turns around and runs off through the woods. And just like before, it sounded like the entire woods was being pulled down with it. Like, it was very loud. I could hear it go all the way down to the creek. Well, when it turned and ran, I'm like, well, here's my chance to get out of here. I grabbed my thermal, but, I was kind of thinking, I don't know what this thing is. I don't know if there's more. So I'm sitting there being all tactical about it. I'm slowly withdrawing, making my way to the corner. I pie the corner just in case there's something on the other side. And eventually I worked my way to the door, get in. I'm like, did that really just happen? I check on the wife and kids. I pull another gun out of the hallway that's set up for home defense with a weapon-mounted light, AR-15. And I basically turn on all the exterior floodlights, and I sit in what we call a fatal funnel in my hallway for the rest of the night, just waiting for this thing to barge in and try to wreak havoc. And, it's been hard to deal with because I thought I was losing my mind. And that kind of goes into the next occurrence. But, it was really hard to process. Like, it was full on, like, PTSD level stuff. Like, it bothered me more than a lot of traumatic experiences in the past.
Yeah, I can definitely understand, and I can tell that you've been holding on to this for a long time, trying to grasp what exactly happened that night. And yeah, I definitely feel for you, man. So the creature, it used telepathy on you. I guess the community calls it mind speak, and I've actually had guests in the past that said the same thing. There have been hunters that reported seeing a Sasquatch, and that's exactly what it said, that it was going to take their life.
Yeah, sir. And there was no doubt about it. Like, it was very clearly, it was not my own thoughts, because number one, I was already having my own thoughts. Like, how was I going to handle this situation? How am I going to take this guy into custody, kind of thing? And, I'm playing out things in my mind, and then, it just boop right in my head. I'm going to take you out, basically.
Was it more of a feeling, or could you hear a voice, like an audible voice?
Oh no, it was audible, and it wasn't quite my own voice, but it wasn't inhuman. You know, it wasn't like super robotic or anything, but it was off. Like you could tell it was just off. It's not my own like imagination or inner dialogue sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Could you compare it to
And like
like demonic voices that you've heard like on Hollywood movies, like something deep and guttural like that, or how would you describe it?
uh, no, not really. And like I said, I'm not really into that sort of thing, so I
Mm-hmm.
don't really have a good reference point for it. I
Yeah.
mean, it sounded sort of gruff. I don't know the right word, but sort of mm, as if it was like a really large, aggressive man.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
with very, it's hard to put into words. It truly is. Like it is very difficult to put into words and thoughts. But it messed me up for a while. Like I didn't go to the woods, and I'm an avid outdoorsman. You know, I hunt, I fish. You know, growing up, I grew up with or grandparents from the Great Depression, so you know it was nothing for a 10 or 12-year-old to walk around the woods with a 22 all day. You know, and that's what I did growing up. Like nothing has ever spooked me or been like that. You know, it's you know, I was very used to the outdoors before this occurred, and after this occurred, I mean, you couldn't pay me enough money to go through there.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, that's creepy because the creature, the being, it was watching you and it didn't think that you could see it, which is scary because there's so many people that go outside at nighttime to let their dogs out or look at the stars, and you just never know if you're being watched.
yeah, and you know, at first I didn't even get the feeling I was being watched. Like I think I took it by complete surprise, like as if it knew the patterns, because it had to have heard me close my door. It had to have heard the engine coming down the hill. You know, there's no hiding a V8 and a door slamming out here where I live. You know,
Mhm.
so it had to have been very aware that I was here, but taken by complete surprise that I rounded the corner with a thermal. You know. And those kind of creep me out. Like, how many nights have I maybe, you know, peeked out or went outside, fed animals or whatever, and the thing might have just been there laying down watching, you know, the whole time.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I said, I mean, it took a long time to process, and I kept it to myself. Obviously, you know, it's not something you normally would want to just open up to the whole world about because I'm sure everyone's familiar with the kind of reception you might get for that.
Oh yeah.
But I think I skipped over it. When I hit it with the white light. Like I could see it recoil backwards with its arms over its face, like to block the light. And I could clearly see amber eye shine, like normal, like eye shine, not glowing eyes, nothing super bizarre, just very clear amber eye shine. But the fact that it raised its hands in front of its eyes, and it was very clearly hands, like they were opposable thumbs. They looked like a human hand, but very large, very large. And you know, its eyes may have been the size. I don't want to exaggerate, but close to a baseball. Like it was a very large eye. Like you could, it was very easy to see at 10 yards. Like there was no doubting this thing was 7 foot or bigger and very, very muscularly built and large hands. The hair wasn't thick. Um, it was actually sort of, I don't think mangy would be the right word because, you know, it might be associated with like a mangy bear, like, you know, oh, you just saw a bear. But it was very thinly covered with hair, but covered completely except the upper torso. The upper torso looked almost as if it was brown human skin, brown, whitish human skin. Um, and the face wasn't completely covered either. And that's what gets me. It looked very human. Like when I turned on the white light, there was no more doubt of what I was seeing. And it was very human like, but also not. It's hard to put into words, but I mean, we had a standoff eye to eye for a good minute. I mean, it was like we were sizing each other up. And I recall like distinctly thinking like I was trying to put it out on a wavelength that it could receive since it was sending me stuff. I know that sounds bizarre, but I'm trying to like think out loud, if that makes sense, to reply to it. And I'm trying to say like, why are you trying to kill me? I'm not trying to kill you. This is where I live, and I'm thinking, well, if you're going to kill me, I'm going to take you with me. I've got 15 rounds of 9mm. I'm a good shot. Got a bright light on it. Like, I'm not going to miss you at this range. I promise.
Did it seem like the creature reciprocated the thoughts that you projected out to it?
I wouldn't say so. Because initially I'm going to kill you, I was curious of what it was more so than wanting to kill it, But after it showed a human form, I was more or less thinking, like, get off my property, I'm going to take you into custody kind of thing. I wasn't thinking, to start blasting. That's not my training. That's not my background. That's not what we do. So I was more or less thinking, what are you? Oh, you look human. Oh, you're a really big human. Oh, you're definitely not human. Like that sort of thought process. The gun thing was just because it stood up, and I'm like, that's a human, but it's not. But I didn't have an intention to shoot it up until it was charged up the hill and was standing there and regurgitated the "I'm going to kill you" part. In which case, like I said, I put my thermal down. It's got a two-handed grip. Turned on the lights. It recoiled, turned around, and ran off, tearing down half the woods with it. Like there's still a game trail there that never existed prior, where it just broke like everything going on the way out. And so that kind of leads me to the next occurrence that allowed me to open up with others. So the first occurrence happened around October 2023, and about a year later, I have a lot of sons, and they were showing interest in camping. So I built a fire pit, and got a tent, and I never intended to actually stay outside. And in the back of my mind, I'm still thinking of this first incident. Like, there's no way we're camping out, even if it's our backyard. Not happening. But put on a good show, got a fire going, cook some hot dogs and s'mores, that sort of thing. And we're just kind of hanging around the campfire. Well, we all kind of go in, we're shuffling plates and drinks and all that sort of thing. And one of my sons was still out here keeping the fire going while we were tending to other business, door wide open on the back porch, going in and out sort of thing. And we hear him scream. Just all of a sudden, he just starts screaming. And I look out the door, and I see the flashlight pointed down the hill on the opposite side of the field towards the corner. And so, I immediately, like, it was first thought. There was no thinking, oh, it might be a coyote. It might be a mountain lion. There was no thought like that. It was like, oh, man, that thing's back. That was the immediate thought. So I grabbed an AR that was at the door. It had a light on it too. I go up and join him, and I can see where he's shining. There's a really large oak tree. And sure enough, there's a head peeking out. It's like same thing as before. There's a head peeking out. There's an arm wrapped around, and you could see part of a leg sticking out just from like the depth perception of where it was like up a hill, sort of leaning on the tree and kind of holding it with one hand. And, freak out is not the greatest words, but my son was absolutely freaking out. He's stuttering, like trying to put it into words, what he's seeing. I see it too. I yell for my wife to grab guns for everybody. And, my other sons and my wife come out with more guns. And we all sort of my wife didn't. She was busy. She was holding a baby and handing out guns. Like, this was like the craziest thing. But she didn't actually see it because she was too busy, like, holding the baby, handing us guns. But I had my sons. My dad was over. My dad saw it. We're all pointing guns and flashlights at this thing. Like, it is completely illuminated. It's got guns pointed at it out the wazoo. And there was no mind speak or anything like that in this situation. But it was very clearly like turkey peeking, trying to see what we were doing. But every time it did, it was catching a lot of light, So it stayed behind that tree for a good minute. And, we're discussing what to do and what it is. And I told my wife to go back in the house and grab my sniper rifle, which is a semi-auto 308. Because I'm thinking back to that first occurrence. I'm like, man, a 9mm or even a 5.56. This thing is so big. Like, I would not want to make it mad and wound it and it charge, that sort of thing. So she brings out the heavier rifle, the 308, and I look through the scope and I can clearly see, and it really messes with you. But I could clearly see part of the hand, part of the arm, part of the shoulder, and then turkey peek, like really quick turkey peek. That's the best way I can put it. And it definitely notices, like, I'm looking right at it through the scope. It notices it's got guns on it. Like, it's almost as if it looked right through my soul through the scope. Yeah. And I was all the way up at 10 power trying to really identify what this thing is. And as soon as it kind of, almost like it just looks right through the scope at me, it turns, like, it turns to its left, and it's completely out of view now. Like, I can't see anything. Like, it's a very large oak tree. I can't see anything. But then, as everyone's just kind of looking at each other, like, what in the world? It leaps. It leaps to the next large oak tree. And my sons are like, no way, because it was a large leap, maybe 7-10 yards, maybe. And it was sort of an uphill leap to the next tree that would give it cover. And at that point, like, there's no doubt in anyone's mind what this thing is capable of at this point. Like, a deer can't do that, a big dog can't do that. Like, that was a very athletic leap from like a standstill behind a tree uphill to get behind another. And so we're tracking it with the flashlight, and everyone gets a glimpse except my wife. Everyone sees the same thing I'm seeing. And it goes from the next oak tree and takes off like galloping almost. I mean, it looked like a gallop, that's the best way I can put it, a gallop, but not necessarily like a horse. Like, its arms are very long, and so it's like it gets more airtime on its front arms to do that, if that makes sense. But it gallops a few paces and gets behind an old torn down barn, and it stays behind that, and we can't see it anymore. There's no way out from behind that barn without exposing itself to us. So we're all locked in. I've got two sons watching the left corner with their lights mounted on their firearms, staring at that corner. I'm staring at the other one and trying to see, because I'm thinking this thing is so human-like. It is smart as can be, like, very smart in how it diagnoses the situation and acts accordingly. Like, it makes sort of perfect moves, and it does it again. I'm thinking it's peeking through whatever cracks it can find, and part of the wall was still standing on this barn, so I'm sure it could probably look through some cracks or something to see what we're doing. And it waits for the perfect moment. My sons start moving up to their corner, and they, you know, I've trained them here and there through the years, but they're by no means like military or law enforcement grade like tacticians, but they are aggressive and they're really good shooters, and they're brave as all get out. They start advancing to the corner, and I'm like, no way, get back here. Like, we don't know what this thing can do. Like, it rip you to pieces. Like, get back here. They made it about 5 or 6 yards before I told them to get back. And they sort of like look over their shoulder at me while keeping their guns down range and start kind of walking backwards. And then the oldest like straight up turns and kind of like jogs up the hill towards me. And the youngest kind of follows suit. And at the moment that they turn their backs and I'm looking at them, my sons that is, and they're looking at me, like the moment there's no guns pointed in its direction, it takes off straight up the hill, like leaping and galloping all the way up a fairly steep, rugged hill. I mean, it's 100 yards at like I don't even know what degree to put on it, but it's not quite a 45 degree, so maybe 30 to 45. It's pretty steep, just a walk. But it gallops and leaps and runs all the way up this hill and disappears in like a couple seconds. And it was really something to see. Like, it was another feat of nature that's just like virtually impossible. And after that, we all just kind of collect ourselves back by the fire, and we're just kind of hanging out. And I decided to open up about the first incident that had happened to me. And, my kids chime in, that's Bigfoot or Dogman. I'm like, what? like I said, I didn't believe in any of this stuff. I'm sure I had heard of Bigfoot. I've never heard of Dogman. Like, I'm in tune with this kind of stuff now because, like, after these incidents, like, I spend my entire day trying to listen to podcasts and self-proclaimed experts and all this sort of thing. And, I've heard some stories here and there that sounded pretty similar in appearances and things that happen. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, that's it. But we put out the fire and we go inside. All of us are getting, the guns back put up and kind of cleaning up our mess and trying to, kind of decompress from that, I guess. And so I sit down in my recliner. My wife sits down on the couch next to me. And just as like everyone is inside, everyone's inside. There's no one out there. We're sitting down for a minute. I'm talking to my wife. Like, she doesn't want any part of this. Like, she don't even want to talk about it. But I'm trying to, explain what I think it might be or what it can do. Then all of a sudden we get a loud thump at the back door. Very loud thump. So it's like, oh man, here we go again. So we grab a couple rifles and open the door. Now, and I didn't see this, but my son says he saw this. There was a mark next to the door and a tennis ball laying across the yard where it had apparently bounced off and rolled. And from the wood lines to my back door is at least 50 yards. So that just added a whole nother level of like, wow, like, initially I thought it was some kind of intimidation, like, but the more I thought about it, the more I kind of think it was like a ha-ha, I'm still here, I can reach out and touch you too kind of thing. But the next day, and still my wife didn't want to discuss this at all, But the next day, she leaves and buys curtains and covers for all the windows and doors, and gets more floodlights and security cameras, the whole 9 yards. And there's been a few other occasions similar to that on the same property. But here's the other thing: none of this sort of thing has ever happened before or since anywhere else. Like, I've gone hiking in the mountains. I've do training, go outside, walk in the woods. All that nothing ever happens anywhere but here. And I was trying to deal with this, because I'm thinking I've gone crazy. Like I've got some kind of paranoid schizophrenia, but then it happened to everybody. Like everybody in the house but my wife got a good look at the thing as it ran up the hill. And so that's just kind of where we're at today. But there was another instance that happened after the first encounter, and I'm sorry, I'm kind of going in between because I don't know, it's a little discombobulating to even kind of discuss this openly. But after the first occurrence, I can't remember if it was the same night or a night or two after, but I was laying in bed and I got the distinct, like, mind speak or whatever you want to call it, that just came right through, like, hey, want to see us? I'm thinking, there ain't no way. Like, I've definitely just lost my mind. Like I said, this is after the first incident. So at this point, I hadn't told anyone. I was keeping it to myself, thinking I just had, like, a bit of insanity, honestly. Like, I was scared to tell anyone. I was scared to have to get, analyzed by a psychologist or something, because, you can't necessarily serve the public if you're a little bit nuts, But yeah, there was this mind speak, want to see us. And there was a clear image of three figures across the yard, across my driveway, across the road, like in the woods, across the front of my house. Like, it was a clear as day mental image. Like, it was like the thing painted me a picture. Like, here we are, want to come see us. And it was three figures. And, like, the best I could tell is this mind speak seemed like a female. I don't know exactly how to describe it, but it seemed like it very clearly was a female. And the figure to its left was its son. And it just so happened to be the one that charged me. And to its right appeared to be a taller, much larger male. But I didn't get any, like, message or impression of who that was. But I mean, not hard to figure it's probably dad, but I don't know. But there was, like, a clear mental image of, like, mother son, and it was sort of like an empathetic, apologetic way of saying, want to see us. Like, hey, like, here it is out in the open. You had an incident with my kids. I want to clear things up so y'all don't kill each other, sort of thing. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's what it seems like. But in my mind, I'm thinking I have just gone crazy, so I ignore it, and I try to ignore it, and it was like the thing was waiting for an answer. And so I'm thinking as crazy as all of this stuff sounds, it would be very crazy to step outside my front porch, walk over there and be like, hey, how you doing? When it felt like one of these things was going to rip me apart. I just had pointed a gun at it and blinded it with light and made it run away after it told me it was going to kill me. So, I mean, it just seems pretty crazy that I would want to go out there and see you guys, But I ignored it through the night and just let it be. It never happened again after that, really. Although, it sounds crazier the more I say it, but there has been a time or two where I've been coming home, and as soon as I turn to get towards where I live. And again, this is way out in the country. So, I make a turn, pass a house or two, then make another turn. And then, it's just like half a mile to my house. So there's been a couple of occasions where, like, out of the blue, like I could be thinking about anything, baseball, sports, work from that day. Just my mind is filled with something, or I'm just chilling, listening to the radio, that sort of thing. But it just pops right in my head. Don't come home. I'm like, what? Like, that's the weirdest thought process. Don't come home. I'm like a quarter mile from my house. What do you mean, don't come home? Like, why would I think that out of the blue? And I thought about it for a second. And I'm like, oh, that's probably the thing. Just kind of giving me a heads up so I don't see it, or so it can get clear of where there'd be a confrontation. That's the best I could figure. And it happened a couple times. And, I'm just thinking, like, sorry, there's no way I'm not coming home. I have a wife and children. Like, there's no way I'm just going to, like, turn around and go somewhere for the night and leave the house unattended. So, of course, I go home. But, every night, some nights, some nights I can almost feel like I'm being watched, like, from the moment I park. So I'm always prepared with, a bunch of flashlights, a weapon-mounted light on my duty gun, that sort of thing, and holster popped open, just imagining something just snatching me up. Like, it's the craziest thing. Like, I'm sorry I'm kind of rambling and ranting, but this is definitely something, you're not told exists. You're told you're crazy if something like this happened to you, or you even think it's possible. But like I said, the fact that, my entire family got to be eyewitnesses sure helped me a lot in kind of processing this. Like, I couldn't imagine the struggle for someone that just sees something like this or deals with a situation like this and, don't have anyone that could believe them or see it themselves. And that's about all I have, really.
All right, John, thank you for sharing all that with me. So do you feel like this family group of cryptids was hanging around your place? Because it sounds like it was displaying the same behavior as the creature from the first incident.
Yeah. The second incident, though, so this is just, I don't know if these thoughts were like sent to me or if it's just kind of what I did with deductive reasoning, but the first incident clearly seemed to be a juvenile, like a young male. But the second incident, it was it was bigger, and it didn't do any mind speak or telepathy or anything like that. It didn't say or think a thing to us. But it seemed larger, and it was slightly different coloration. So, like, the first one was predominantly brown, like cinnamon brown, grizzly bear brown, which, again, there are no grizzlies. I live in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains, Blue Ridge Parkway, Virginia, North Carolina. There's no grizzlies here, zero. There's few black bears. There's not many black bears, and I know there is an occasion where a black bear will actually have cinnamon colored brown, but this was definitely not a bear. But the first incident, it was more of a brown color with, like, sort of like a Hispanic complexion to the skin of, like, the upper body and the face, like a Caucasian or Hispanic male. Like, that's the best way I could put it. Like, kind of tan, but kind of white. I don't know how to put it any better than that. Like, that's what it looked like. Very human-like skin. And the second occurrence, it was more gray, like way more gray. Like, there was like a streak of gray and predominantly gray, but there was some brown mixed in, and it also had sort of a brown complexion. And that kind of throws me for a loop. Like, think of like the brown on a coyote and the gray on a coyote. Like, it was similar, but not quite. Like, there's very distinct difference. For one, the hair was thin. There was no mane. There was no like lumps of fur. Like, it wasn't heavily hairy or furry. Like, you could clearly see, elbows, chest, hands. Like, it was very clear, which is kind of the spookier part, I guess. Because believe me, I would much rather it have just been like a bear that just kind of, freaked us out. But no, I wish, I could believe that, but you know, my eyes say different. The thermal said different. Like I said, you could clearly tell the shape of the body, bipedal body, very human-like, broad upper body, hips. You could clearly see hips, like very much unlike a bear, where you might have like short legs and a sagging buttocks, like and a distinct hump when it's on all fours, and like very distinctly kind of squat and imbalanced on two legs. It was nothing like that. It was both occasions, very fluid movements, galloping movements, but not lumpy or lanky or if you've ever seen a bear kind of run on two legs, it was nothing, or run on four legs. It was nothing like that. Like,
Did it run more like a cheetah?
Yeah, like leaps and bounds, like galloping, bouncing off of its front arms. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when it was on fours, it was very clearly like using its upper body strength to like leap much farther than you ever would on two legs.
Yeah, I'm not trying to ask leading questions. I just seen a group of Sasquatch take off through the woods, and when one of them ran, it was like the size of a huge black bear, but it ran like a cheetah. Like when they have like their legs spread out, kind of like Superman. It was strange.
No, that's a good way of putting it, because that's basically spot on. Like, arms go out and front and firmly plant and take another wild leap. And it was very fluid, like very Olympian level, like technique and fluidity to the movement.
Mm.
Like, I'm sure you've seen bears, like when you see bears, it is not that fluid of a movement. It's like a clumsy, almost clumsy, like, even if they're bluff charging you, you can tell it's a bear just by how they move. It was definitely moving like a big cat, like very fluid, very fast, and using, like I said, using its upper body, like to propel itself even like straighter and farther than you could imagine, like a 7-foot bear or anything, human, anybody being able to do.
Yeah, it's one thing to encounter something like this, but to experience the mind speak, I'm sure you were beside yourself, and like you said, you're questioning what exactly happened, and I can't imagine how hard that is. I've experienced the same with like paranormal activity, like hearing disembodied voices, and it's definitely hard to wrap your mind around that.
Yeah, and like I think I said at the beginning, it's like I've never believed in that sort of thing. It's never even interested me as like as a thing. Like, not into it. Don't believe in ghosts or Bigfoot or aliens or anything like that. Like, and one thing I forgot to mention that this could be a bit important here. The first incident, when I was basically having an armed standoff with the young juvenile. I remember thinking, I remember basically asking God for forgiveness and kind of accepting my fate right there. And, that's, at the time, I wasn't particularly religious or believed in any of this sort of stuff. But in that moment, I accepted fate. Like, this could very well be the end of me, but I'm going to take you with me, and I'm going to pray and hope for the best. And here we go, sort of thing.
Yeah. What makes you think it was a juvenile? You described the first creature as like around 7 feet tall and built like a linebacker. Was the second creature a lot bigger than that?
Well, the second time I saw a creature, it was bigger.
Hmm.
Like it was distinctly bigger. It was maybe 8.5, 9 foot tall. It was a different color scheme. Like I said, more gray, and it took some pretty large steps. And we actually went out the next day after that, and we tracked it. I mean, the woods are, covered year round in leaves and foliage, but you could clearly see impressions. And, I matched up my size 12 boot next to it, and it's like 14 by 8, like an 8-inch width, which is, I have a wide foot, man, but the 8-inch width on and it was clearly like a foot impression. It wasn't like paws. It was clearly like a foot,
Hmm.
very clearly a foot. And it was about 14 by 8. And we could follow the impressions, and everywhere we went with the impressions, like it correlated with what we saw. Like it was no mistaking it. There was no like scaring ourselves. Like we went back to the original oak tree and started from there. And right when we got to the oak tree, we could see the impressions of both feet facing the oak tree, facing us. Like it was standing squared off with the tree, facing us. And we could clearly see where it had turned and like pressed off of one foot to get some leverage to move. Like because it had dug in facing its left. And you could clearly see like a much deeper impression where it put some weight on that leg to spring like that leap into behind the next oak tree. And we followed the path up the hill from the barn, clear impressions until about halfway up, and there was a lot of ground foliage. So, but the whole time, I was also verifying, like, I'm not just nuts. I'm looking at other sign. I've I've taken some training courses on tracking. I'm by no means an expert tracker. I'm not trying to say that, but there's other signs to look for other than impressions or footprints. And I'm looking for like freshly broken limbs, freshly broken like ends of plants, and we're following sign and impressions all the way up the woods to a wheat field. And when we got up the hill to the wheat field, it's like, there's no way we're going to know. We turned around and just left. Like that was the end of our curiosity for that day. Like we're not going through there. On the other side of that is a big like water reservoir that the creek runoff actually goes by our house. Like, we're surrounded by woods, creeks. One of the creeks runs all the way from the Roanoke River through the Appalachians. So, the more I thought about it and researched, the more I'm like, if it's a family or if it's a traveling area or migration pattern, it's clearly using the waterways. Because I overlaid like a pretty good topographical map with the creeks and running up the rivers, and then I tried to do some research and other spottings or incidents, and it's like they line all the way down, like the Dan River, the Yadkin River, the creek here. So there's something to that. Like I'm by no means an expert in any of this stuff. But there seems to be something correlated with either migrating the waterways or just using the waterways to be able to have a place to survive. I don't know. But it seemed as if we were on its home and it's on our home, if that makes sense. Like it seemed as if they were living here, and they were just, I think after that first incident, they were just like keeping closer observation or trying to send a message. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a enforcement person, first responder, have you heard of any strange reports from that area? Anything that correlates with what you experienced?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. But, you know, like I said, I didn't believe in any of this stuff, so we usually wrote it off to someone having a few too many to drink, or drugs, or someone needing to be committed. That's kind of how we viewed these reports. Like, I don't know of anyone that really takes them all that serious.
Yes.
But I mean, we for sure, have responded to calls like that. And, you show up and see if anything is like wildly out of place. But yeah, there's been reports here and there.
Yeah. What's the strangest report that you've heard?
Oh, an orange orb outside of someone's window in the wood line with what they described as an alien, but really kind of described one of these things. Extremely tall, extremely muscular. Booger is what I believe came up. They call it a woods booger.
Yeah. And how is your family dealt with the situation that happened? Were they cool with it since they already knew what cryptids were? Has it haunted them? How has this changed your family?
Well, my wife didn't believe in any of this stuff until, something got thrown at the back door right after we were all, out there kind of freaking out with it. My sons kind of knew of cryptids. Like, they were kind of explaining to me, but I don't know that they necessarily believed it until they saw it. But no, our family, my wife wants to move. That's not happening, so we just kind of live with it, we haven't tried to hunt these things down. We haven't tried to ambush them or anything like that, but we definitely stay armed around the property just in case. I mean, we have small children, which, I mean, is also kind of bizarre to say, but I mean, there's other things. Like I said, we live out in the country, so there's snakes, there's coyotes, there's all sorts of things. But that's another thing. Around the time of the first incident, we were already noticing, like, afterwards, there was a distinct lack of wildlife. Like, all of a sudden, the rabbits that would be out every morning, every night aren't around. We had barn cats that were just more or less wild cats, but we fed them, and they hung around the barn and hung around the shed, and a couple of them even hung around the house and were, pretty friendly. And, one of them would even come inside and hang out like it was an indoor-outdoor cat. But they were all just kind of, not necessarily feral, but they were just kind of not really domesticated cats. But yeah, after the first incident, 5 of them went missing. And to our knowledge, there were 6, maybe 7 cats, but 5 of them were gone in like one night. The squirrels don't come around. The rabbits don't come around. Here recently they have, which, I mean, good news, I guess. Yeah, there's a distinct lack of wildlife.
Yeah, and there's been all kinds of reports in the Blue Ridge Mountains and in the foothills area. And do you believe this was a Sasquatch creature? Because I recall you saying it looked human-like. You don't think it was a dogman, right?
Well, one of my sons really thinks that it was a dogman because he thought he could see a hawk, like a canine hawk for the back leg. I didn't see that. I don't think so. From what I could directly observe, again, through a rifle scope, through a thermal, and with a white light at 10 yards, it was very human-like. Like, so human-like, it makes you want to, like, I was hesitating on the trigger, It was very, very human-like, but also distinctly not human. That's kind of the best way I could put it.
Yeah, that's terrifying. And what kept you from pulling the trigger on the creature?
Well, like I said, as soon as I put the white light onto it, I set the thermal down, put a white light on it,
Mm-hmm.
it reared back, like recoiled back, and had its hands and arms blocking its face. And as it did that, it did a 180 and took off through the woods. And I'm like, wow, that's, it scared me to death, but it's like, you can't mistake that. Like, there was very clearly forearms, elbows, hands, very large hands. It was very distinct. There's no other animal on earth other than humans that look that way. I mean, it was very clearly not a gorilla. It didn't look like an ape or gorilla or monkey. Looked very human-like.
Yeah, and it seemed to know what the firearm was.
Oh, absolutely. Like, before it charged up the woods, like I said, I unholstered my handgun. As soon as I started raising it is when I got the "I'm going to kill you," followed by leaping into the woods and charging up the woods. I mean, it was very clear. Like, it could either see it, smell it, watch my hands, and know what that means. Like, there was definitely a perception that it was under threat. Like, I could definitely tell that it knew that it had to go. It couldn't just stand there.
Yeah. And after these experiences, was there any other strange activity that took place around the property or even in the house as far as like paranormal stuff, any visitations from otherworldly beings, UFOs, anything like that?
No, I mean, there's been, my barn doors have been opened when, they were very much secure.
Mm.
My father has told me that he's heard footsteps around his windows at night. And in fact, one night recently, fairly recently, he thought it was me trying to get in the house, and I was not here. I had just pulled onto the road when this happened, and he could distinctly hear footsteps like running away from his window. And I was pulling down towards the driveway, and I parked like almost simultaneous to this happening. So that was pretty bizarre. That wasn't too long ago, but it's just been little things. Nothing necessarily paranormal that I know of.
Okay. I figured I had to ask. And do you remember the month or season of the first incident that you had?
Yeah, it was October 2023.
Okay. It was in October. So in the fall time. And was there any indication before all this stuff happened? I remember you saying that nothing happened before this or after. Do you recall anything after listening to other people's testimonies regarding cryptid creatures that maybe could fall in the category of them being around?
Yeah, yeah. Just little occurrences of, I've walked outside before and spotlighted and caught eye shine here and there. But there was one on occasion, normally I would just draw it up to coyotes. You can tell the difference, if you're out and about enough, you can tell the difference between different wildlife and different eye shine that you would get. But there was one occurrence years before this happened. I mean, a decade before the first incident, where I picked up eye shine, and I was just kind of like woods bumming, walking around the property, and I caught eye shine, and it was very large eyes, and I thought maybe it was a deer. It was amber eye shine, so I was kind of like, I don't know, but it hissed at me, like growled, hissed. It wasn't anything that I could ever find. Like, I remember trying to find a vocalization or a sound that was close to this, because it wasn't like a mountain lion, and we don't even have mountain lions really. I mean, there may be one or two, but as far as like fish and wildlife is concerned, there's none here. So it was just a really bizarre incident where it was like a hiss and a growl, a real guttural growl. But I didn't think too much about it. I tried to find what the sound was because it very clearly wasn't a dog, wasn't a cat, wasn't. I could never find what it was, but there was that. But just a slight correction. I mean, there's been these little incidents since that first incident, but nothing like that first and second one. No direct confrontation since then.
Yeah. And normally I would ask, what do you think the creature's intentions were? But after you describing the mind speak, I think we both know, which is a chilling thought.
Yeah. It seemed pretty solid in what it intended to do. However, the more I thought about it, I mean, it's been a couple years now. The more I've thought about it, the more I kind of think, I'm not certain, but I kind of speculate that it's possible when it realized that I could see it and I could track it and that I was raising a firearm to it. It seemed like it was using sort of like a technique that had been used before to scare off humans. Like it almost seemed like it was using sort of like a pre-planned action. Like, I'm going to send the mind speak, I'm going to tell it, I'm going to kill it, and then I'm going to stand up. So, I mean, because it did, it stood straight up, showed its size, and then leapt into the woods and charged parallel to me. And that seems like sort of a reaction you would do to scare off a human. Like, if I put myself in its position, that seems like that would work 99 out of 100 times. But, it seemed like maybe on that night, I was the wrong human to do that to. Because, I instantly thought, like, there's no way I can run and there's no way I can make a run for it. And I'm fairly highly trained. I'm not the type to scare too easily. So I ended up just having a standoff with it instead of running. I think it anticipated me to run, like a strategy that it would use to get humans away. It's kind of my speculation.
Yeah,
So I don't know if it really intended to take me out or not. I kind of get the feeling if I had pulled the trigger that it very well might have. Because at that point, the gloves are off both ways. But I tend to speculate that it was just using a strategy to scare off people.
Yeah, it could be, but I don't blame you for taking action and not waiting to find out.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, John, you did an excellent job at logging down the report and describing everything that happened. Do you have any questions for me before we wrap things up?
Well, not necessarily. I'm just kind of more at ease that we're not the only ones out there that have had experiences like this.
Oh, yeah.
I used to think people were just crazy for, like they must have, drugs or alcohol or a mental break, paranoid schizophrenia. Like I've always just drawn those conclusions and dismissed other firsthand accounts and reports. And like I said, after I started listening to some shows like yours, it's like, no, like I've got a pretty good BS meter. And, I can tell there's quite a few people that have had very similar experiences, very similar sightings, and were in fear of their life. And I totally get it now. But whereas before, I would definitely just think they were out of their mind. But it was a very humbling experience. It was powerful enough to all of a sudden want to pray and, accept your fate. That's it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of people out there that have described the same encounter, and I definitely believe you, and you're not alone.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. If you have any questions off air, feel free to reach out. You know my number and you know my email. And yeah, I appreciate you for logging down this report.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, I'm going to let you go for now, and you have yourself an excellent day, okay?
All right. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. You take care.
All right. Bye.
Bye. John's experiences along the Blue Ridge are certainly terrifying, and they blur the line between the physical and something far more unsettling. These weren't brief glimpses or distant sounds. These were close, calculated interactions with something that appeared aware, strategic, and at times openly hostile. Whether it was the thermal signature watching from the dark, the figure peering from behind a tree, or the overwhelming sense of being targeted, one thing stands out. Whatever is out there knows the terrain, and it knows when it's being watched. If you have a similar encounter you would like to share here on Sasquatch Theory, feel free to reach out sometime at sasquatchtheory@outlook.com. If you would like to join the membership today for additional content, live videos, and extended footage, feel free to join, and I would really appreciate your support. With all that being said, you guys be safe out in the woods.